Hello, weren't you supposed to have moved out already? You're always so slow. The movers will be here in an hour. Last week, my husband and his partner made it clear it was time for me to leave. Then, just a week later, the doorbell rang. Standing there were my husband and his partner. How did they even find my new place? I managed a facade of indifference as I greeted them. "Hello, what brings you here?" I asked, keeping my tone light despite the confusion swirling in my head. "Wait, what are we even discussing?" "My name is Donna, a 36-year-old housewife. My husband Matthew and I have been married for 8 years. This year was supposed to mark our 8th anniversary. Surprisingly, I've lasted this long, given the challenges. My in-laws were particularly tough on me, constantly ordering me around. "Hey, bring me my coffee," my father-in-law would demand. "Sure, right away. Donna, haven't you cleaned the bathtub yet? And the garden is still a mess," my mother-in-law would chide. I apologized, feeling overwhelmed. After marrying Matthew, we moved in with his parents. Matthew insisted it was tradition for the eldest son to stay with his parents. I hoped it would just be for the first year. "Don't be selfish," he said. "It's what Mom and Dad want, and it'll teach you how to manage a household." We had no discussion about this before our marriage, but I loved him and wanted to make it work. So I agreed, albeit reluctantly, to live in my in-laws' home, Paul and Margaret. "I'm excited to start our life together here," I said, trying to stay optimistic. They welcomed me with warm smiles on my first day, making me hopeful that maybe, just maybe, things could turn out well. However, my hopes quickly crumbled the following day. My in-laws began to show their true colors. "How long are you going to stay in bed?" my mother-in-law snapped, her tone harsh as she woke me up with a glare. I glanced at my phone. It was only 4:15 a.m. "It's only 4:15, I mumbled sleepily. "So what? Do you think you can finish all your chores if you wake up this late?" she retorted. I was bewildered by her expectations, but it soon became clear what she demanded. "First, you need to prepare breakfast for everyone. Pancakes for Paul, cereal for me, and you must also make salads and cook eggs. And don't forget to pack Matthew's lunch for work." With such a laundry list of tasks, I realized waking up early was my new norm. Despite my grogginess, I managed to whip up breakfast and pack a lunch for my husband. But when breakfast time came, my in-laws were inexplicably furious. "What is this? I just had scrambled eggs yesterday. You can't do the same thing 3 days in a row. You need to be more creative," my father-in-law barked. I was taken aback. I had only arrived the previous afternoon. How was I supposed to know his daily menu preferences? My husband, meanwhile, showed no interest in defending me. He sat silently, absorbed in his breakfast and the TV, seemingly oblivious to my plight. Their unreasonable anger was a shock, and I felt utterly alone. When it was finally my turn to eat, after my father-in-law had left for work, I sat there with my cold breakfast under the scrutinizing gaze of my mother-in-law. "How long do you need to eat? You are slow," she commented disdainfully. From the very first day, I felt a sense of despair. Why was I being treated this way? That night, alone with my husband in our room, I pleaded with him, "Do we have to live here with them?" The thought of living like this forever was unbearable, and my distress must have shown because I couldn't help but speak my mind through tears. My husband seemed taken aback by my emotional outburst. "Don't be so hard on yourself," he tried to reassure me. "They're just testing you to see if you can handle the pressure. Once they see you're strong enough, they'll start treating you better." "Really?" I questioned, skeptical yet desperate for a glimmer of hope. "Of course," he insisted. "Just give it some time. You'll win them over." Encouraged by his words, I resolved to do my best, believing that eventually my in-laws would come to accept me. With this new determination, I threw myself into meeting their expectations, tackling all the household chores with as much diligence as I could muster. However, things didn't go smoothly. The demands of my in-laws were erratic, often changing unexpectedly, which left me confused and prone to mistakes. Whenever I faltered, the scolding was immediate. "Oh my, why can't you do what you're told? You are a dawdler," my mother-in-law would scold, using the nickname that stung with every utterance. I was deeply saddened by her harsh words, but my frustration began to fuel a determination within me. I was resolved to master the household tasks and earn their approval, no matter how unfairly they treated me. This determination became a kind of silent competition with myself. Gradually, I learned to detach from the immediate sting of their remarks, viewing their criticisms more like the meaningless barking of two upset dogs, an analogy that somehow made it easier to cope with the stress. This perspective prevented their harshness from weighing me down emotionally. However, while I managed to cope better with my in-laws, my relationship with my husband started to show signs of strain. We had been married for 4 years, and over time he became increasingly distant. He used to cherish our time together, planning outings on our days off and sharing lively conversations with me at night. But recently he had grown silent, especially concerning the issues with his parents. Whenever the topic of their treatment came up, he seemed to withdraw further, preferring to remain uninvolved. This shift in his behavior troubled me deeply, as it felt like I was losing not just the battle with my in-laws, but also the connection with the man I married. Whenever I shared the day's events with my husband, he seemed distant and uninterested in anything I had to say. It felt like he was gradually losing interest in me and our marriage. I found myself questioning whether it was right to continue in a relationship where I felt so unsupported. During this period of doubt, my father-in-law unexpectedly fell ill and passed away. The shock of his sudden death deeply affected both of us. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was especially devastated, having lost her lifelong companion. Despite her previously harsh treatment towards me, I couldn't bear to see her so broken. I made up my mind to stay by her side and help her through her grief. "How are you feeling, Margaret?" I asked gently, trying to offer some comfort. "Thank you for asking, Donna. I'm feeling a bit better today," she replied, her voice weak. The loss seemed to have softened her somehow. The once harsh and demanding mother-in-law was now visibly fragile and exhausted. Recognizing her need, I took it upon myself to take care of her. I managed all the household chores, regularly bought her favorite treats, and even took her out to a cafe when she felt up to leaving the house. The experience of losing someone so close was undoubtedly profound, and I understood that. As I continued to support Margaret, she began to recover gradually. She smiled more often and started to take on small activities by herself. Eventually, she even expressed her gratitude to me, a moment I never thought I'd witness. "Donna, thank you. Thanks to you, I'm finding my way back. I'm sorry for how I've treated you," she said one day, her voice filled with sincerity. "It's okay, Margaret. I hope we can support each other from now on," I replied, feeling a genuine connection forming between us. From that point, the harsh treatment and bullying stopped. Our relationship transformed, and I finally felt a sense of harmony in the house. Reflecting on the early days of my marriage, I remember how overwhelmed I felt. Considering escape from the daily demands of creating varied breakfasts and meeting my father-in-law's strict standards, it was clear now how much my mother-in-law had been under his influence. Understanding this, I felt a new empathy for her. She had lived under significant pressure and control, which she had unwittingly passed on to me. Now, freed from that dynamic, we both found a way to coexist more peacefully and supportively. My mother-in-law had grown to see her stringent way of life as normal, largely influenced by her mother-in-law. However, the passing of her husband marked a significant change, allowing her to gradually return to the more relaxed person she had been before marriage. She used to believe that if something was done to 60% of her expectation, it was perfectly acceptable. Over time, she shared stories with me about her early life, her meeting with my father-in-law, and their early years together. These stories brought us closer, and I cherished the quality time we spent together, which somewhat compensated for the strained relationship with my husband. As the years passed, age started to take its toll on my mother-in-law. Her mobility decreased, her legs and back weakened, necessitating more frequent hospital visits. Eventually, she required a wheelchair, but our home, being an old structure with many steps, was not wheelchair accessible. This situation posed a significant challenge for her daily life. While pondering the possibility of remodeling my in-laws' home to make it more accessible, my parents came forward with a generous offer. They proposed giving up their own house, which was already modified to be barrier-free due to my grandparents' needs. The house was relatively new, only about a decade old, and fully equipped to accommodate someone with mobility issues. My parents were planning to move to the countryside for their retirement and saw this as an opportune moment to fulfill that dream. The proposal seemed beneficial for everyone involved. Excited by the prospect of improving my mother-in-law's living conditions, I discussed the idea with her and my husband. Both were thrilled with the suggestion. This potential move held the promise of not only providing a better living situation for my mother-in-law, but also possibly bringing a new, positive dynamic to our family relationships. We moved into my parents' house without delay. I was already familiar with the home, which had been modified to be barrier-free, making it an ideal setting for my mother-in-law's needs. The house was also conveniently close to where my husband worked, easing his commute and adding a bit of convenience to our lives. Life became peaceful and tranquil. Even though my relationship with my husband wasn't perfect, my bond with my mother-in-law had grown strong, making this new arrangement feel like a sensible way to live. However, 4 years after we settled into our new home, my mother-in-law's health took a turn for the worse. After some tests during a hospital visit, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, with only about 7 months to live. Determined not to let her face this alone, I visited her daily in the hospital to keep her company. "Thank you so much for everything, Donna," she would say during my visits. "Don't worry about it," I'd respond gently, hiding my sorrow. "It's the little moments that matter most now." She seemed to find peace in accepting her limited time, spending her days quietly and without complaint. When she passed away 7 months later, my grief was profound. Initially, our relationship had been fraught with difficulty due to her harsh treatment, but over the 7 years we spent together, she had become incredibly dear to me, almost like a second mother. At her funeral, my tears flowed unceasingly, a testament to the deep bond we had forged, especially in her final years. Following her passing, the house felt emptier, and so did my heart. The presence of my mother-in-law had filled our home with a kind of energy that was now painfully absent. With just my husband and me remaining, I couldn't shake off the intense feeling of loneliness, as if a vital part of my life was missing. Since I had spent most of my days with my mother-in-law, her absence brought into sharp focus the growing distance between my husband and me. We barely spoke in the mornings or evenings, and on days off, outings as a couple were non-existent. My husband started working longer hours, often coming home late, and even began working through weekends. It seemed like he was intentionally trying to avoid spending time at home. Feeling increasingly isolated and lonely, I decided to take up a part-time job. This turned out to be a refreshing change. Interacting with my colleagues brought a sense of camaraderie and relief. We shared our frustrations and challenges, which became a much-needed outlet for my stress. However, just when I started to adapt to this new phase of my life, my husband blindsided me with a request for a divorce, thrusting the papers in front of me without warning. "I want a divorce," he declared. I was stunned, not just by the request, but by the abruptness of it all. He then dropped another bombshell. "I have someone I'm in love with," he admitted, and without pausing, he introduced me to Anna, a young woman dressed in flashy clothes. It turned out she worked at a strip club he frequented, and they had started an affair. What's more, she was pregnant with his child. "I want to leave you and remarry her," he said flatly, as if our years together meant nothing. The shock was immense. After all the years I'd dedicated to managing our home and enduring the challenges with his family, his betrayal felt like a severe blow. Anna, standing there, seemed almost gleeful about the situation. "We have a new family member on the way, so will you make things easy and step aside?" she asked smugly. Their blatant disregard for my feelings solidified my decision. I agreed to the divorce. "I'll give you some time to find a place and move out," my husband said, as if granting me a favor. I signed the divorce papers with a heavy heart. Now we were essentially strangers. 9 days later, my ex-husband and Anna showed up at my door. "Haven't you moved out already? You're always so slow," he taunted, echoing the unfair criticisms I used to hear. At that moment, I realized that the end of this chapter was indeed the beginning of a new, hopefully brighter one. I replied calmly, unbothered by their urgency and ready to move forward on my terms. They seemed quite pleased to see the cardboard boxes stacked up at my old place. An hour later, the movers arrived and whisked everything away. "Good, then get the hell out of here," my ex-husband jeered, with his partner smirking beside him as they waved me goodbye. Unbeknownst to him, I had a surprise up my sleeve that I chose not to reveal just yet. I had already moved to a new house and was settling in comfortably. A week later, a knock at the door startled me. It was my ex-husband and his partner. "How did you find me?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "We followed you from work. That's a bit stalker-like, isn't it?" Their expressions were tense, clearly upset about something. "What's going on?" I played dumb as they burst out. "We were living in that house and suddenly got an eviction notice." "Oh, is that so? I wonder why," I feigned ignorance. "Don't play dumb. You must have done something," they accused loudly. I had no choice but to reveal the truth. "Well, I sold the house," I said simply. "What? Why would you sell it without asking? You can't do that," the woman exclaimed shrilly. "That house was mine to sell. It was given to me by my parents and is in my name," I explained calmly, watching as realization dawned on my ex-husband's face. "So that house won't become our house," he stammered, his plan unraveling. "No, it won't, and I don't know what promises you thought you heard, but the house is no longer available," I maintained a steady tone. Their argument escalated, and I firmly told them, "If you continue this noise, I'll call the police." They left in a hurry, but I wasn't finished. Given the circumstances of our split and the financial strain they'd caused, I decided to press for alimony. I demanded $70,000 from my ex-husband and $45,000 from his partner. Additionally, I revealed that my ex-husband was infertile, a fact we discovered when we were trying to conceive, which he had concealed from his new partner. The turn of events left them reeling as I closed this painful chapter of my life, ready to move forward with a clean slate. When I discovered the results of the fertility test, it was just after my father-in-law had passed away. In the turmoil that followed, I never had the chance to tell my husband about the diagnosis. As time passed, our relationship continued to deteriorate until we had grown completely apart, and I never shared the information with him. This oversight turned into a significant revelation later on. When my ex-husband introduced his new partner as pregnant, the truth about his infertility meant that he couldn't be the father of her child. This revelation threw them into turmoil, ultimately leading to their separation. Amid these developments, I asserted my rights and demanded alimony from both of them. I made it clear that if they failed to comply, I would take legal steps to ensure payment, including wage garnishment if necessary. My ex-husband, having lost his house, ended up living in a modest apartment burdened with debt. Meanwhile, his former partner moved back in with her parents, relying on them to help raise her child and assist with her financial obligations. Both found themselves in dire straits, a situation that seemed fitting given the circumstances. Amid these changes, my workplace offered me a full-time position, which significantly improved my financial stability. I moved into a comfortable studio apartment and immersed myself in my work. While I'm not rushing into anything new just yet, I'm open to the idea of finding a partner as I continue to focus on my career, feeling stronger and more independent than ever.